Today on the podcast,
Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy.
Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy was on our podcast.
We interviewed Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy on this podcast.
I don't really know how we made that happen, but somehow Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy was on our podcast.
We did it on a computer.
So he was very generous with his time. We talked about his career. We talked about money. We talked about
craft.
Taylor Swift. So much stuff. And we just yapped for a while with Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy.
He was on it.
Thank you, Patrick. This is Glass Sleeping Season 2. Let's fucking go.
Okay. Hey, guys. Welcome back to Glass Slipping. I'm Keaton.
I'm Pete.
And we are here today with a very special guest. I guess, would you call this the start of our second season, kinda?
Kinda. We took a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
We rolled out like 3 straight months of content.
And then we took a little break because I was on tour and, whatever. But we are back with an extremely special guest today. My friend, Patrick Stump from the band Fall Out Boy. So special to me.
I feel really special.
Oh, good. I'm glad. We're so excited to have you on this podcast because, like I said, it's been really cool to see and talk to a bunch of creatives on many different levels of where they're at. And a lot of people are really young and just starting out, and some have been really successful and some are still kind of grinding it out. So I think it'll be a really interesting conversation to kind of talk about, where you're at in your career and the things you want. And I don't know. Yeah. Pete, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what we talk about with artists is just kind of the financial reality of trying to make it as an artist. And we haven't really had the opportunity to talk to someone who, we've talked to people at different levels of the mountaintop, but no one who's scaled to the top. And so
I don't know. Maybe this is the top. I don't know. You did make fun of how many guitars I have back there.
No, not making fun.
Well, what we talk about a lot is it doesn't really feel like there's a ceiling in the entertainment space in terms of how high you can go, but there is a really clear floor that most people are starting from.
Yes.
And most people don't ever find their way out of. And so
there's a lot of standing room. It's endless.
So I don't know. I'd be interested in starting with where you guys started before you hit on a major level. Because Daisy Grenade has had some really awesome opportunities in the last couple of years. They're growing. They're gaining
largely
a fan base.
Thanks to them.
Yeah. Largely some of those huge opportunities they've gotten have been thanks to Fall Out Boy, but they're still climbing the financially secure mountain, the notoriety level, being able to work their way into direct support, all of these things. What was that grind like for you guys before the actual breakthrough?
Well, the thing that's been weird thinking about it as a business thing, because I frankly am not the money guy. By the way, I just turned off my air conditioning because I realized that it was on, and it's probably going to be in the background of everything. I really am not much of a business guy, and I'm not much of a. I suppose I'm very ambitious, but my ambitions are all musical or something. It's not really that. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but so much of what I did was just focus on working in music and being better at that. That a lot of these things had happened while I wasn't watching, while I wasn't paying attention. And specifically, it was because of the band. It was because of, really heavily, it was because of Wentz, because he was, it's weird. It's hard to describe him because I think people on the outside could get this perspective that he's this ruthless businessman guy, and that's not the thing.
It's so not his vibe.
Well, it's just, it's weird because I think when you read about him, and he's got Clandestine and he's got Decadence and stuff, he's got all this history of setting up things and businesses and things like that, and he did handle most of our business early on, but his whole thing is just being kind of honest and earnest about how you're supposed to do stuff. So making sure people get paid and stuff, whatever. It's really it's really weird because I feel like he really just made that a priority. And his parents are his dad is a lawyer, and that was always the thing, is that Pete wanted to do things correctly or whatever. And so because he had that focus on it, I never had to have any focus on it.
That rocks.
And so really, the business part became more about the focus on. Well, it's weird. It's almost like we all kind of had different things that we specialized in.
Yeah.
Like I said, Pete was really focused on making sure that, everything was done above board, everything was done correctly. And so even back to like, van days and stuff, he would, he was making sure all the bands got settled up with evenly, because everything was about like just treating people okay, was kind of the vibe. Meanwhile, he and Joe had this thing that was kind of funny where they were like kind of ruthless and relentless with promotion, with self-promotion. In that era too, it was weird because there wasn't, it predated any social media, obviously. But it was kind of the beginning of social media. It was MySpace and stuff like that. And people, it's weird because at the time, a lot of older people didn't take it seriously at all. Mm-hmm. And we were just old enough to still have the like, pass out flyers at the show kind of thing, but then also spend a lot of time online, just promoting. And that was kind of Joe, I remember in particular, used to just like go into because back then it was a lot of like chat boards and chat rooms and stuff. Yeah, and he would go into any chat board or anything that was even tangentially related. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm keeping that
in. Anything that was even tangentially related to music that we could be associated with of any kind. And he would just spam,
That's so funny to me because he so does not like read as that kind of a guy. Like,
yeah, I know, but he actually put the band together. It was really he started it basically.
I didn't know that. Yeah, I was gonna say like what you guys were really young too, right? Yeah. When it all started out, how old were you guys? Like
I was 17. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
That makes sense that then you would have the wherewithal just being in to be early adopters on MySpace or getting into chat rooms and recognizing the internet was the new space and I feel like you guys hit at a point where CDs were still being sold, but also they were starting to sell on iTunes. They were starting to sell digitally in new ways. So being at the forefront of that.
Yeah. And honestly, that had a really big impact on the way that we were able to work because, it was at the time, it was kind of a new idea and people thought we were crazy we actually picked out songs that we would be like, okay, this song we're just giving away for free. We're just putting this everywhere. We're gonna spam this thing everywhere. We're posting this on MySpace. We're posting this absolutely anywhere that people can hear it, so that then they want to buy the rest of the CD or whatever. But like, so many people from the older camps were like, "That's crazy, you're just."
You're just giving away money or devaluing, yeah.
Meanwhile, we would be touring because it's weird. We're kind of like this in-between thing where we're not like a total overnight success, but it happened faster for us than some of our friends, I guess. So it's like kind of in between where it's like I remember taking Panic at the Disco on their first tour. That was their first ever show. They opened for us. So, there's that version of it versus you could be, there are bands that slugged it out for 20 years before they had a hit or something like that. We're kind of this in between where we did the van tour thing relentlessly for like about 4 years. And
during that van tour phase, were you guys like breaking even or in the green, or were you in the red? Like, how did
we were in the red for a lot of it. I was,
I know that.
I was like dead broke. And I couldn't, I remember I had my mom had given me a loaf of bread that I could as one of the things I could take on tour. Whatever. She was my mom was kind of like in this weird place because she really didn't want me to go on tour. She didn't want me to be a musician because she's an accountant and just logically that's not a good financial decision.
It is, It is not a good financial decision.
And she, so that was a concern of hers. so she really kind of was at this distance where she's like, I want to support you, but I don't want to like enable you, I guess, kind of thing. So she gave me this loaf of bread, and one of our buddies was being kind of like was just being like rowdy and silly, and he picked it up by the like, you know, wrapping and hit me with it like, this is funny, and it all like disintegrated in there. And I remember just being like so bummed because that's like, fuck, I'm not eating for you know, for a week or
that
whatever.
is like, that's such like a visceral, I get that, where it's like you pull up to like a gas station to get food and you're like, check your bank account and you're like, oh, I have $4. Actually can't get food today.
I literally had nothing because I had my college fund that I'd been saving into for forever. You know, it would be a thing if I got my, you know, it was a thing that we would put into, you know, if I got any money for my birthday or something, whatever. I've been putting money into this, and I think I had like, I don't know, I think my whole life there had been like maybe $2 or $3 grand had accumulated in there. And then when I didn't go to college, that became rent. And that lasted me through, because I did have a job, but it wasn't really covering anything. So,
yeah, of course.
So by that time, I think I lasted, you know, I think I really stretched, and with work, I think I made it through like 5 months or something before I had nothing.
Just
and so
dead
like
broke,
so by the time the band was touring, I had literally nothing. So no, I remember I had $300. It was the last $300 in the account. I became the guitarist by accident because we couldn't keep a guitar player, but I couldn't afford a guitar or anything. I had nothing. I had no gear or anything. But the band was like, you know, you got to hold up your end of the responsibility, and you need to get an amplifier.
Yeah,
you need, well, they even the guitar. So one of my brothers had given me his guitar that he had gotten, my stepbrother. So it was his from, you know, his mom had given it to him or whatever. And it went to me, and it was like this, you know, it was like the cheapest, you know, but I still have that guitar. I love that guitar. But so I had that, and then the band was like, you need an amplifier. This is, you know, really, you know, like silly that you don't. So I took my last $300 and went to Chicago Music Exchange and got this solid state Hughes and Kettner head. And I brought it. That was the only thing I could afford. That was the only head that I could afford. And I brought it into practice, and they're like, nah, we're not using that.
They're like, this is a piece of shit. That's so funny.
I was like so, you know, crestfallen. I was like, I have nothing now.
You're like, you took my last $300.
Yeah, I mean, and whatever. We were all kind of struggling at that point. But I think,
of course.
I think maybe me more so, just because I didn't have, just because I was, I guess younger. Joe was younger than me too, so I guess but like they had school, so it wasn't quite as much my mom wasn't ruthless, but it was very much this thing of like, if you're not going to school, you're not sleeping
helping
here. You're not.
Okay.
It's very like, you know, this is what, you know, this is your responsibility. So
how much of that time were you on the road versus having to figure it out like at home?
Well, so it started, and we did like, I graduated high school. Actually, you know, Saturday, the song Saturday,
yes,
2 more weeks. I was graduating in 2 weeks when I wrote that, and I was leaving for and we were going on tour with Spitalfield, and that was our first tour. We were going to go out, and so literally I graduated, and like a couple days later we went on tour, and
that's crazy.
And so we did that, but then nothing really came in for a while after that we did that one tour, and then we really didn't get to tour for a while. So it was kind of like I had to be not working. I had to not have a job so that I was ready and waiting, but then I couldn't afford to do that. So it was kind of this really delicate balance. And that lasted for a while, really. It lasted maybe, it lasted about 6 to 8 months before we started really getting more shows like out of town. But in that interim, we were just playing everywhere we could. There was, and we would play a lot of free shows. The Metro in Chicago would do a thing where they would have, you kind of had to work your way into it. They would like build you up to allowing you to do this. But once you were in, there was a rotation of bands that you could do these all ages shows that were free. And
that's sick.
Yeah, it was sick, and you could give away as many tickets as you could print physically as you could.
That rocks.
Yeah, so Pete and I would go to the Kinkos and just print out sheets and sheets and sheets of tickets.
That rocks.
And and we had one of those big paper cutter things.
Paper cutters.
Yeah,
Yes.
and this is what we would do all night. We would be printing flyers, we would be printing tickets and cutting them, and then we would we would split up all 4 or 5 of us, but really the 3 of us. I mean, Joe, Pete, and I were the center of the band. We had kind of had a couple drummers and a couple guitar players, but nothing ever really gelled, and no one was ever really as invested as we were. And the 3 of us would go to every record store, every, cafe, every, tattoo parlor, every place that we could find that like seemed to have any relation whatsoever to something that people might be interested in us or something, and we would ask if we could put tickets in the door, or we could in the window or whatever, or put flyers or hang posters or whatever. And so we would play these free shows. And the other one was there was a cafe, what was it, Mojo's or something like that. It was like a coffee place, but it was kind of an open, like they had just like a binder with a calendar in it, and you could
just
sign
put
up.
your stuff in there.
Yeah, you could just so us and other bands would put together Academy Is, a lot of those guys, their first bands, their early, before Academy Is, the bands they were in,
I love that
were
band.
like Damar from Knockout, or from Plain White Tees. He was in a band called Knockout, but like his bands and stuff, we would all just play shows that we would, it was basically an open mic, but
that's so cool. I feel like go ahead.
No, and so it was kind of so that way we had something going every week. We had shows absolutely every week.
And refining a set at least, even if you weren't getting the opportunity to. So how did you break through from that to like getting onto tours, or like what was that evolution?
So we had done some recordings. So it's weird. Take This to Your Grave. So we'd done this thing, Evening Out with Your Girlfriend. That's actually kind of an anachronism, because a lot of people don't realize this, but that didn't come out until it was released a week before Take This to Your Grave was. So we didn't have anything to tour on. We just had demos, but to play on. We really didn't have anything, but we had gone in and recorded a demo. Someone had lent us money to go and do 3 songs, and the 3 songs ended up being on Take This to Your Grave. It's part of the same. It's the same recording. So it was Dead on Arrival, Homesick at Space Camp, Saturday. And
that might be Homesick is maybe my favorite song of you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, of all of them. That's cool.
That's when I wrote a lot of words. So we had that demo that we were kind of taking around and stuff, and it was weird because we got denied by every label. It was kind of
really.
It's kind of Pete used to frame them. Pete used to get the rejection letters and frame them.
That's awesome.
Would they send you a letter? Like a physical letter?
They did. Not all of them did. A lot of them did.
Being like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, if you had any dealings with them, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
It wasn't like if it was totally unsolicited and they didn't care or whatever. But if you had kind of like an email with them, like, hey, maybe they would send you a nice little letter, and we got a lot of letters. We got a lot of
That's so crazy.
Letters. And so but we got Fueled by Ramen sent us back a. Maybe we kind of need to hear more.
Yeah.
And so in the interim, they had hooked us up with how did we hook up with Punchline? I don't remember. I feel like it was through Fueled by Ramen, but at any rate, Punchline was this band, and it is a band in Pittsburgh, old friends of ours, like really sweet guys, and really fun band, and at that point, because Chicago is not. New York or LA. It's a major city. It's a huge city. People that haven't been there have no idea. They're always surprised, like, oh, it's a city. It's like, yes, it's a major city, but it's not the center of the universe. So people don't know. There's a weird opportunity there to be kind of really locally very popular without people knowing you outside there.
But still kind of underground,
So we had kind of hit that where we had started. By that point, we were like, now we were getting offered regular shows at the Metro, opening, for real bands.
Is the Metro the one that you guys did like last year? You came back and did
yeah,
in Chicago?
yeah.
That was so cool.
Yeah, that's our like, that was like, by the way, my ambitions in life, that was like the biggest thing I could have imagined. Like I didn't have any, there was nothing beyond that to me. It was
I totally get that.
Like the biggest bands in the world played there. That wasn't
played there. Yeah, to you at that time. Like I still kind of feel like that sometimes. I think about like playing like Brooklyn Bowl or like Brooklyn Steel or something like that, and I'm like, that would be insane to headline Brooklyn Steel.
No, totally. Where you're like, and I don't know, it's weird because it's such an interesting perspective, because now we've played, we played Wrigley, and somebody asked me, did you ever imagine you'd play here? I'm like, I didn't know bands played here. It's not like it's not a thing, like.
I didn't know bands even could get that big.
Yeah, it's not. It's very designed for baseball. It's not really.
Yeah. I feel like similar to kind of what Pete asked, but I'm like, was there a moment kind of, or like you said, it kind of all happened so like not behind your back, but like you weren't looking at it while it was happening. Was there a moment that you were like, oh shit?
Well, I'll get there. I wanted to finish off the thing with Punchline, because Punchline, we had kind of become, because of Chicago, and we had kind of developed a thing there where we were kind of, there wasn't really anything like us. I don't mean it in a special way. There just wasn't.
No.
At the time, we were kind of, there was a very definable pop punk scene that was like, and I mean like Fat Records, like pop punk,
Totally.
Like kind of, like whatever, kind of very Blink-182 meets Strung Out meets, like everybody sounded like that, right?
Totally.
And then there was emo, and I mean Midwest emo, and it was it was a different thing, and neither of those worlds had anything to do with us, wanted anything to do with us. And so there wasn't really, all our friends were hardcore kids. We would play hardcore shows. And so it wasn't until we bumped into Punchline, who had a similar thing where they were kind of this like outlier in Pittsburgh, and they and Pittsburgh, another place that like, it's a city, but it's not a huge city, and it's in a location where a lot of people will come there. And so we started playing together, and we would do this thing where we would kind of like, bring each other along. And so we started doing this like figure eight thing, from around the Midwest, and then into kind of the East Coast, but kind of like the around Pennsylvania and Ohio, and then we go into Michigan, and then we go to Iowa and Indiana and whatever, and we would do this, like we started just living on that, and us and Punchline must have done that. So there's a venue in Detroit, it's the venue that they didn't actually shoot 8 Mile in, because I guess it's like too sketchy to actually film there. But called The Shelter, and we played there just by chance, just by doing this like figure eight thing that we would just go through, whatever. We kept hopping on tours, and we would be there every 2 weeks. And the promoter there, he's like, I like you guys. You can't do this.
You can't play here every 2 weeks.
It's not a residency. Like you can't, whatever.
That's so funny.
Anyway, but the big moment, I would say, for us was probably Skate and Surf. So a bit later, so all the things I'm talking about, somewhere in the midst of this, eventually Take This to Your Grave comes out. Eventually, we start doing MTV2 stuff, and there was MTVU, was also like a college-focused MTV channel, and they had these like, and they started giving us a lot of love, and some of the local radio stations started giving us some attention and stuff. But through all this, it was kind of happening while we weren't able to pay attention, like you weren't home watching TV, so you didn't know you were on TV, that kind of thing. And so then we got to Skate and Surf, and this was around when we get signed to Island, right? And so record's not out yet. We don't, Cork Tree's not, I don't think Cork Tree was out yet. But I remember the label was coming to see us, which was very intimidating. And this has been kind of written about a bunch of times, and it's kind of this legendary moment, but it really is this legendary moment. So the Bouncing Souls were playing the main stage. There was like a big stage. There were three main stages, real stages at Skate and Surf. There was one that was in like this auditorium, and then there was another that was in a kind of auditorium thing or whatever, and then there was a stage that was kind of in the hallway, right? And we were playing the hallway stage, which is kind of like the smallest one, and you kind of expect
stage.
you kind of expect it's not like a total hallway, but it's kind of this big court. It's like the lobby, right? And there's a stage at the end of it, and it's probably meant for like 500 to 1,000 people, tops, if you're really knocking it out, if you're really, if really, whatever. So somebody in the Bouncing Souls room was screwing around with a fire extinguisher, like was being kind of like, just a silly kid and whatever, and like pull the fire extinguisher. Well, that triggered the fire thing. So everybody got moved out into the lobby, all of Bouncing Souls room and all of the other room, right? All of the two stages all let out into this corridor. I don't know this. We don't see this.
You're just like, hell yeah.
Yeah. So we do this high five thing before we play, and I'm in the front and center, so my back is to everything. First off, when right as we're going up before we do this, the head of the label is there. And he was like very intimidating. He's like, he pulls us aside and he's like, don't blow this or something. It was very like,
encouraging.
Like it was supposed to be encouraging, but it's like, that doesn't work on nerds. So funny. I got into music in part to get away from sports, so this isn't motivating me.
Yeah, totally.
So then we do the high five and turn around. And now instead of 500 people or whatever it was supposed to be, there's 5,000, right? And because it goes all the way back the whole thing. And the thing was, they weren't all there to see us. The majority of the people weren't there to see us. But in the first place, there were more people there for us than we expected. So it would have been one of the biggest shows we ever played, even if that hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Then everybody is stuck there because the fire marshal's like, it was weird. The fire marshal's like, okay, these two stages you're shut down until we figure out what's happening. The lobby, you can go ahead for some reason.
Stay.
Yeah. So we play. And we kind of win over this audience of 5,000 people or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was exhilarating, but it was terrifying because it wasn't the plan. And again, the Metro, I think holds about 1,500. So this was so far beyond my concept of
what
anything.
Totally.
So. Yeah,
that was
crazy. That was my moment, I'd say.
When you realize that you're like, okay, something's happening here. I feel like that's such an interesting. That reminds me of like when we walked out for When We Were Young, where it was like, we're opening the main stage. Like, we know that all of these people are not here to see us. Like, they're waiting for you guys. They're waiting for Pierce the Veil. Like, whatever. I didn't give a shit. I just was like, they have to be here, and we're gonna win them over. And that's such a crazy feeling of like, I thought that when I looked at that. I was like standing, like down the stairs off the side of the stage. All I could see was the VIP that was like sectioned off. And I thought that was the whole crowd. And there was like maybe, I'm not kidding. There was like maybe 1,000 people there. And I was like, okay, it's early, but like people showed up. Like, that's awesome. I was like, it's small, but it's okay. We'll be great. And James, my boyfriend on TM, was like, no. Come walk with me. And like walks up the side. And I see just like that 20,000 people just like all the way back. And I was like, oh my God.
Did you have the thing? I always felt this when opening bigger shows like that, opening big rooms like that. It's also this thing where they start filing in, so it's like,
oh yeah,
people are getting settled, which is like, there's something, it's really exciting, but it's also really intimidating because you could have those 1,000 that you can play to. That's manageable, what you're doing, but then
totally.
As like you all of a sudden you start, because you can't even really see how many seats are there until people start moving in them, and you're like, and oh no, like, it's like, like,
well, I thought that it was really funny on the last run that we did on with you guys was like, at the beginning of the night you go out and like there's feasibly probably 5,000 to 10,000 people there in those big arenas because they're so spread out, and it looks like maybe 500 because you can't, it's, you know what I mean? And like, that never really like that. I don't know. I just didn't really think about it. It's easier inside too because you can't see anybody. So you're like, you can see like the first 5 rows in the front, and you're like, great, I'll play to them. That's great. And then you kind of remember that there's people like kind of everywhere and whatever. And then because people are like, is it so scary to play arenas? I was like, well, I was like, you're playing an arena, but like you're really playing to like maybe 5,000 people.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and you can't really see them. So it's like, it doesn't feel that. It is intimidating in different ways, but it doesn't feel that crazy. And then when we walked out to sing with you to a full MSG, I was like, okay, that is scary. When you walk out and you can see heads of people
scary.
All the way up to the top, and you're like, oh yeah, a full arena is a very different situation. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think I was just saying like that moment is so funny to me because I'm like, there's something very powerful in like, knowing that maybe everybody isn't there to see you, but watching people get won over as you play it is such a special thing, I think. And
it's something I kind of miss about headlining. When I miss now that we headline a lot is that there is something kind of special about surprising people, because I think when they're not there to see you, even when we did the Green Day thing, because I think a lot of people, most of that audience knows who we are, but I think a lot of that audience hadn't seen us and doesn't really, I think you get an idea of what a band is or whatever based on pop culture or something, and then
the one day you guys didn't play, I was at that show.
Yeah,
on Hell Omega.
One day. I wish I was at that show, but
yeah, that's interesting. That it's like, I think another question we had for you, which kind of ties into what we're talking about right now, is like once you're at that kind of level where you're headlining all the time and you've got thousands, like, tens of thousands of people coming to see you all the time, like what still drives you about doing it? Like what are you still kind of hungry for? Like what are you still like pushing for if it's not, if that aspect is just kind of locked and loaded for you now?
Well, I was talking about this with, I've talked about this with a couple buddies, that there's a thing where, because I just always had to do the music part. I just have to. It's kind of funny. I don't know how this came up the other day, but I was talking to somebody about, music as a thing that I ended up doing. And the weird thing is I never really, this is going to sound silly, but I'll explain it. But I never really wanted to do music. I couldn't not. I just did. There were all these things that I dreamed of and planned and imagined. I wanted to be a scientist when I grew up. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be like all these different things. And I tried and worked at those things and practiced those things and learned at those things. But then meanwhile, I was just doing music. Yeah. And I couldn't not. I didn't even realize I was doing it. So, and just by nature of that kind of made it a thing, made it what I was doing in a different way than, I feel like there is, if you're trying to achieve a thing, that's a different, there's so many, I got knocked around some of the songwriting camps and things like that and whatever. And I was like, this isn't for me. Not because there's anything wrong with it. There's brilliant writers there and stuff. But one of the things that I didn't like was it's hustle. And the hustle is about I'm going to get my publishing on this. I'm going to get my name out there, all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't see any instruments here. I just really want to, I would get thrown into these writers camps or things, and there was this perspective of trying to achieve a thing, and I never really had that, because to me it was just about the fun of continuing to make music and stuff. And so now, one of the things after we hit a certain point where the band was big enough, because where are you going to go? There's, not to say that things can't happen, but you kind of hit a point and you're like, we're probably not getting any bigger. It's not like, we're not the Foo Fighters or something.
I guess, but I'm like, I don't know how much bigger you get as a band, really. I'm like,
but
you guys
that's
sell
what I'm saying.
MSG,
that's what I mean, is that there's not really anywhere to go but down, I guess. So so then that stops being the thing. It's like, I there used to be this thing where I would be really burnt about tour. I would just be worn out and stuff, and management would be like, oh, come on, this is the big, this is going to be the biggest thing, this is a really big, this is a really big venue, this is a really big show, really big band, really big thing. And after a certain point, I'm like, what's bigger at this point? Like the fucking moon? Like, what are we gonna?
Yeah, what are we doing?
Playing.
So once you've reached that peak, and once you've hit that point where you're playing stadiums, everything else, is that a freedom to then say we've hit the peak, we can do whatever we want, or is that pressure to say we've hit this peak and now we feel like we need to maintain a certain level? Or
I think everybody handles it differently. I think I've seen artists respond to it in this really with discomfort, because then at that point your career is going to oscillate. It's going to be, you're going to have, good years and bad years where there's going to be a song that people like, and then there's going to be a song that people don't like, whatever. That stuff's going to happen. And then a lot of these, and at that point, I've seen artists that kind of get into this place where you kind of live and die by a hit. It really is about having a hit record. And the weird thing is that that's not really as much of the gig as you think it is. It's important to have a calling card and have an audience, but you can totally have one of those without even having a hit.
Totally.
So there are plenty of artists playing very big rooms who don't have any hits, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so then when you're kind of trying to live by the hit, that's a whole thing, and it's kind of you can make it last, but I find that unsustainable. And so to me, the other option is at some point, there's, like you said, maybe a freedom of kind of just being like, that's probably not happening again. We're probably not going to contrive having, another, I don't know, whatever, we're probably not going to contrive having a song in this movie again, or having a song in whatever.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of like find yourself and find what you like, and we always did. I think we were always, I am the accident in all of it, where I'm just making music and I have to make music. And then usually it's people around me who spot it and go, that's a hit. That's some, follow this. But I'm compelled to do a thing, but it's really kind of like the aftermath where people go like, oh, that's a radio song or something. But it kind of, if anything, I kind of had to contrive more opportunities to make more music, because that was one thing that I was finding when we were so in the grind of, and when we're in promotion mode, especially the old eras of, now I think it moves a lot faster. You have to be generating content and all these other things. The old model was that you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. Yes, I do.
But the old model was very much put out a record and you ride that thing into the ground. You are going to beat people over the head with this one record, and you're going to do it as long as you possibly can. You're going to play this at all the TV shows that'll take you, and you're going to play this at, kind of analogous to the Metro thing where we were just going everywhere. You do that, but with one album, and you really work that thing like crazy. And I found that cycle just
exhausting.
Agonizing, because it was like, meanwhile I'm not, it wasn't, people would ask me, do you ever get bored playing the same song over and over again? I'm like, no, but I get bored not making new songs.
I relate to this so deeply, because this last tour, we've been touring, I will say, for how Danny and I have kind of shifted and been molding ourselves into doing the like content thing. It's just like, it's important. I remember Minardi told me that TikTok was MTV, and that's just the way that it is now, and you either get with it or you don't, and that really helped. But for what it's worth, like, the way that we kind of started this band was like, it sounds sort of similar to what you guys did, as similar as it could be, I suppose, where it's like we just played everywhere. Everywhere in New York, played a show a week. And so molding into this new kind of like content era has been weird for us, but like we have ridden this EP that we have out for like 2 years on tour, and we put out singles and whatever, but like it has just like, this last tour was the first time I think that it hit me where I was like, oh my God, we have just been driving this into the ground.
No, and I've heard some things that you've played me, just ideas and things. But, and so obviously you've been writing in that time.
Yeah.
But do you like, do you get, how is it different? Like, do you notice a difference between when you're home or when you're on the road in terms of like your capacity to make things?
Yes, I do. I feel like I get really like on the road, like I'm just trying to like stay healthy and get enough sleep and not like, you know what I mean? Like that sort of like takes 90.
All the performance concerns.
Yeah, the performance stuff, like 99% of my time. And then also like somehow trying to maybe have like a good time also. Like, you know what I mean? Like trying,
it's minor.
Whatever.
That's least important.
But like, you know, when I'm home, like I find myself when I'm home getting inspired by like more things because I have more time to like consume different things. Like I have more time to like read. Like I just read this very weird book that I just like was so, I don't know, it just like was consuming my every thought for like 4 days after I finished it. And I wrote something that was like sort of inspired by it, which I'd never done before because I thought, I don't know, but I just wouldn't have had that time to like let it sort of marinate with me and sit with me while I was on the road because I'd just be so concerned about like where am I going and when am I getting there and how do I get all my stuff inside, you know?
And it is really fascinating that you bring up the idea of the performance factor because that's another thing as an instrumentalist. I think there's a line where some musicians, you know, this isn't any, I'm not slagging anybody,
no,
but you're able to get away with not doing that much with you know, I know the song and then I get on stage and I play it, right?
Yeah.
Some musicians can kind of do that. Some musicians, what is demanded of them requires a lot of preparation.
Yeah.
And that preparation goes into your day and that takes up time. So by the time you've gone through all your, you know, you've done all your warm-ups and you've done all your steaming and you've done all your like physical exercises, like I get out of tour shape real fast because it's one of those things where you know I'm sitting around, I'm, you know, watching TV, I'm reading, I'm like, I am not, you know, when I'm on the road, I just as a function of, you know, posture and breath support and everything, you know, I have to be running and I have to be, you know, whatever I do, I'm exercising a lot. I'm doing a lot of different, like, there's so much to that routine. That takes up time.
Totally.
And that's time you're not writing. That's time you're not thinking. And then by the time you can, you're you're exhausted, you know, if you have anything.
Yeah.
Whereas I think at home you can have those moments of like, you know,
like
in the
recoup.
shower or something occurs to you and you're like, oh, that's a great idea, you know, like whatever, that's not going to happen to you on the road,
or having the time
rush.
to like, I call it the songwriting fairies. Like sometimes they visit you and if you don't write it down in the time that they're there, you're gonna lose it. So it's like I've had ideas on tour and like they have visited me and I've had the thought where I was like, I could really write this down right now, but I just don't really have the energy to do it, and then it's lost, you know. And
that's that Mitch Hedberg joke where he's like I'm a comedian, which means when I think of something funny I have to write it down. Or if I'm too tired, I have to convince myself it's not that funny.
yeah, literally. Where I'm like, whatever. It'll come if it's worth it. It'll come back, or something.
Exactly.
But you know, I think I like having kind of two modes, which maybe is not particularly helpful or the best. But like, I feel like I'm either kind of in writing mode or I'm in tour mode. And like, I think especially as vocalists, like, it does take so much of your time just to make sure that you can do the songs. You know.
Yeah.
And like,
well, and what you do on stage too is so involved. It's not something you can kind of half-ass. I feel like you can really hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing.
Absolutely.
So I mean, that's going to take up a lot of time. It's not.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things I wish people understood, the chasm of like how different it can be for different people. I've seen singers who just like, you know, depending on the instrument that they have and depending on the way they use it, some singers can totally just like smoke weed and whatever, and you know, and kind of clear their throat and go out and that's
and be fine.
And that's the show.
Yeah, totally.
And then you know, if you're really having to belt, I mean, that's going to be your whole fucking day. It's like,
oh, absolutely.
You know.
And I'm like the kind of person that like my voice needs time to like sit into whatever we're doing. Yeah. So like if I'm not singing King for a Day every day leading up to tour, it's not going to happen. Like it just won't happen. So
people watching this or listening to this, I it's one of these things. Keaton and Danny and I will occasionally send kind of just singer, kind of like complaints, help, whatever to each other, because it's one of those things where like, you know, there are days where you wake up and you're like nothing comes out.
It's not happening
and it's,
today.
And it's
Yeah.
the weirdest thing to like not have you like. It's weird that there's when you. It's kind of like this little. It's kind of like a club, you know, where
Yeah.
there's not a lot. You know, when meeting singers who really sing, where you're like, oh, like I know I'm with you. This is
I
like,
had this moment on this last tour with Derek from State Champs and Cassidy Pope. We were all together and we were just kind of talking. Cassidy, first of all, she was on this podcast a couple weeks ago. She is
I love
just
Cass. She's so fucking
she's
awesome.
literally the best. I love her. She's like a sister. She's moving to New York, which I'm absolutely thrilled about.
Sick.
Yeah,
Good for her.
I'm so happy to have her here. But she and I always talk about how like it's just a different beast. Like when you're really singing out there. And I'm like, and Derek too, where he was like, a lot of people take, you know, I feel lucky where it's like my things that I have to be really careful about are pretty standard. Like I just have to like, if I'm dehydrated, nothing's happening. If I haven't slept, nothing's happening.
But that's like the baseline
But that's
of
baseline,
the,
where
of
it's
the
like-
muscle that is
Yeah,
your
yeah.
voice.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, where it's like I said, it's pretty standard. Where it's not like I have to like
but you
can't drink
that's
anything
you
fizzy.
have technical training too, where I feel
Yeah.
like you don't put your voice in the compromised like muscular state.
No, I don't.
Outside of like sleep or dehydration, which are much more typical to being on the road.
Well, yeah, I feel lucky that I have enough training that I'm like, I know I'm singing properly. So if it's like I'm singing correctly, if I'm singing the way that I know that I should be singing, I'm not going to hurt myself. But like, you know, it's just harder on tour. And like, but I feel lucky that I haven't had to do like, you know, I don't drink anything carbonated. I don't do dairy or whatever. I'm like, I'm going to enjoy some cheese on the road. Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of old now, so that's just kind of comes for you. I do unfortunately have to do all that stuff, and it's fine.
But that's commitment to it as well.
How did that like routine for you develop over the years? Like what was it like when you were 21 doing that, and like how much were you learning as you went, and like how much
Well,
of that now being a fully grown adult?
There's so many different things that like kind of bled into each other. First was confidence as a performer, because I was not a singer, I was a drummer, and I just kind of
Which will
happened to
truly
Which is so
always
funny.
blow my mind.
That's
We were
such a
laughing about
funny
this.
thing. Like,
It's just so crazy.
It's weird, but it's also one of these things. I was thinking about it. You know, first off, my dad and my brother sang and sang a lot when I was a kid. My brother was in like choir and stuff, and so he was like the singer. He was a trained, you know, he had been more trained and stuff. I wasn't. I just kind of had the instrument, and I also guess I wasn't really aware until I was like in a couple bands, you know, I was like in my teens. I was driving by the time I understood that like there were people who couldn't sing. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought everyone could sing a little bit.
That's
it was just
so
different,
funny.
you know,
I
whatever.
love that.
So I didn't know there was anything distinctive about being able to sing a certain thing.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, in the kind of, because I had done most of the punk stuff, most of the bands I had been in were heavier or screamier or more or grittier in some way, and so it wasn't really a benefit to have a nice voice. That wasn't really anything that ever came in handy to me. And so it was just a thing that I didn't notice I had. So then it was kind of about getting that out. And then there was also kind of, I talked about this on another podcast. It was really funny. We were trying to talk about soul music. But they had been in improv, and I was just so fascinated about improv. I had too many improv questions, and so I didn't talk about soul music at all. But I was in love with soul music, but that felt like a very separate aptitude, like a totally unapplicable thing.
Yeah.
And it was this thing that just kind of kept bubbling out by accident, spilling out in some vocal performance stuff. Because when we started, and they decided that I should be the singer, because I didn't pick that. It was kind of like, I'll play anything. Just let me write songs. That's all I want.
Who told you to be the singer?
What's that?
Which one of them was like, you're the singer now?
Both of them. Joe and Pete looked at. So it was actually, Joe was the first. It was funny because I had said to Joe that I wanted to, you know, they were looking for a drummer, a guitar player, or a singer, or maybe a bass player. Pete could have swapped depending on the person, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, and I was kind of being cocky, but I kind of can sit in on a lot of instruments, but I couldn't really at the time. I was a drummer, and I was kind of like, oh, I could do one of those, right? And I had made this demo with a buddy where I ended up playing most of the instruments on this one song on it, and I sang on it. And I sent that to Joe, and he heard that and went, and he called Pete in to like, to come over and have me audition. And I didn't really know, because I was like, I play drums on that. The drums are pretty good, but I also play guitar and whatever. And Joe was like, singer, you're going to be the singer. I had no idea at that point, but Joe kind of had that in mind. And there was this moment where Pete looks over to Joe and he's like, this guy should sing. So they picked it. But sorry, I'm rambling, but I want to get to the point.
No, it was great.
So then the soul thing started coming out. So that was gradual, because after they kind of picked me to sing, now I'm like, they said, okay, we want to be a pop punk band. Well, I don't know. I liked a lot of punk and I liked a lot of pop, but I didn't really like a lot of pop punk. I really didn't have, there was some kind of hardcore that was melodic hardcore that I could get into. I did like Lifetime a lot.
Yeah.
I liked Kid Dynamite a lot. I did like, I loved the Descendants, who are not hardcore necessarily, but whatever. But there was a lot of melody there, and I really liked. There was one Saves the Day record that I was really into at the time, and so I kind of had to like, I was kind of looking at that stuff, but then there was also this other pop punk that was a little bit more, snotty, like kind of
whiny,
like fourth generation
yeah.
Tom DeLonge impersonation that I was kind of like, okay, well, maybe that's what they want me to do. So I started kind of doing that because that was what
was like trendy. Yeah.
Was. And I couldn't maintain it. I could do it. I can do impressions, whatever. And I would do it, but it kind of just gradually wore away. I would just get tired of doing it. And I would sing a song enough times and it would start to kind of sound like me, and these little soulisms would kind of bubble up, and the guys would go, do that again. That was good. And I was really scared. I was like, that's not supposed to, that was an accident. I'm not supposed, this is me in the shower. This is not.
I know, but that's just the coolest thing ever to have that kind of collaboration where they're like, oh, this thing that you do organically, we love that. Do that.
Was there a moment from that finally you, like, when did you finally accept that you were a singer and that was like something you did and were good at? And like, did it take the audience responding positively, or was it just an internal thing you were able to come to yourself?
So I told this exact story on that other podcast. So sorry, it's a canned answer, but it is the truth.
No, it's okay.
So pretty much through all of Cork Tree. So from Take This You Gave through Cork Tree, I kind of had this because I was a drummer, because I dumb lucked into it. I had this kind of perspective that this is a fluke and I should not put much hope in this, right? And I shouldn't take this too seriously.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really get too attached to it. I actively made myself not get too attached to it. And I would say a lot of like dismissive things to my parents about like, oh, well, I swear I'll go back to school after this flops and whatever, we'll put out the record and then whatever. And we put out Cork Tree. And like I said, there's, I did put some of myself in there, but it was still very guarded. It was still very like, I'm very scared to feel good about this,
Yeah.
And we got, and I would also kind of, like I said, I did a lot of self-effacing. I'm very self-effacing, but I was kind of effacing of the whole band and everything. Where I'm like, oh, it's this dumb band, because I think it was a defense mechanism because it's like I'm worried this is going to fail. So
yeah, of course. Whatever. So you're going to protect yourself that way. Yeah,
were you seeing any?
Exactly.
I mean, because Cork Tree was really the like true commercial breakthrough. Were you starting to see that money at least on the other side, or were you starting to see?
We got paid, but the thing that's weird is that you could still, there's still not necessarily light at the end of that tunnel, because unless the record does a certain amount, you owe your
that
label
money
that.
back.
So we got paid, but it was like, it's a
don't
loan,
spend it.
really.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until we're like well into the record cycle, and this is the moment we got nominated for a Grammy, right? And we got nominated for Best New Artist, which is one of the, they televised that one, so they put you up pretty close.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there, and I felt awful.
Oh.
You should feel good, but I felt terrible. because I'm sitting there and I'm looking at all of these musicians and all these people I respect. You know, I remember distinctly, I was sitting behind Chuck D, and I was sitting across from Elvis Costello, and I was sitting, and then I remember I was like 12 feet away from the stairs where where everybody goes up to accept the award, and Herbie Hancock played with Christina Aguilera, and at one point Alicia Keys and Stevie Wonder are presenting an award, and as part of their award they kind of sang a little bit, right? And Stevie Wonder is good at music, and him just kind of like offhand humming, just kind of casually whatever on this like cheese ball, like it was like some sort of pun where it was like, they had him, on the teleprompter. It's like, and then you sing this line, and him kind of just throwing it out there was fucking stunning. It was like, I was totally knocked out. And again, and I felt like dirt, because I was like, I've been taking this thing not seriously at all, and just kind of like shitting on it the whole time, being like, oh, whatever, this isn't a real band. And, and Pete and Andy also had successful hardcore bands.
Yeah.
So up to a point, I was like, well, clearly this is a side project and whatever. I can't really say that anymore,
Yeah, no, I would say you can't say that anymore.
so I felt terrible for kind of belittling it like that to myself, and then also I felt like a fraud for like, that this band, other people are seeing things in this band, and I am not allowing myself to, and I'm not taking it seriously, and I'm not practicing or learning or anything, right? And I left there. We didn't win. And it was really funny because one of my friends was like, "Oh, I know you're upset you didn't win." I'm like, "No, that is not. We didn't deserve it, because I didn't take it seriously. I didn't care about up to this point. I haven't cared, and I'm like, I will never not do that. I will never do that again. I'm gonna." And I left there, and I went to Amoeba, because we were in Los Angeles. I went to Amoeba the next day, and I just started getting every record that I admired, that if I didn't have a copy of it, whatever. Like every legendary record or whatever, every album that I thought was a great album or had great songs or anything, and just kind of studying everything about them, from the performance to the songwriting to the production to everything, and just diving in, because I'm like, I just felt, like I said, I felt this like tremendous irresponsibility that it was like insulting to music that I was so
I think
lazy.
That's a pretty like that's such an atypical response for what were you at this time, like 21 maybe 22?
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah.
So like I feel like I can't speak to the average 22-year-old, but I know if I was 22 and like hitting the world at that level, I don't know that I would have had the wherewithal to
understand feeling.
Or be that introspective and feel that responsible for
my own response to it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty crazy to think you could have.
I don't know. That's just how it happened for me. And then, I guess I could be introspective about music, and then I just, didn't, really call my friends for 2 years. I don't know. At the expense of something else.
It all falls to the wayside somewhere or another.
After that discovery, did you start to feel good about what you were actually doing?
I don't even think I had time to think about good. It was about just practicing, just shedding. It's weird. I didn't shed instruments necessarily. I wasn't like, I kind of go in spurts of like, okay, I'm really practicing drums, I'm really practicing guitar, I'm really practicing piano, whatever. I have those periods, but I was like shedding like the fuck out of songwriting and album creation. I was just diving into everything I could about Thriller and Born to Run and Peter Gabriel's So, and all these albums that I thought were really special. Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, like all these records that I was like, and then it also became whatever my gig was. I'm the guitar player. Okay, what are guitar sounds that are really important to me? What are guitar performances that are important to me? I'm a singer. What are vocals that are important to me? And I kept going back to soul music, because that was the pinnacle of singing to me. That was the, to me, it was like Luther Vandross is like the ultimate. You know, that's if I could do anything, it would be to do that. You know,
Yeah.
just to sing. You know, or Donny Hathaway. If I could hear a person sing, or there are performances. You know, Nina Simone. There are just so many singers that had and have such a tremendous capacity that I'm like, that's what real singing is, right, to me. And so I was like, I'm going to study that. And so I really did. And like I said, I didn't really have a moment where I sat back and went, oh, I'm good at this. It's kind of, that the Dunning-Kruger, have you ever seen so we talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect, you know, where someone who doesn't know that much thinks they know a lot.
Yeah.
But when you actually see the graph of the experience versus confidence, it's really funny because it's like this really sharp, like, oh, I know a little bit, I know fucking everything. And then once you realize that you don't, there's this like steep thing, and then it comes back around after you get to like expertise, but it never gets back up to here. It never gets up to the point where you think you know everything again. And I think it's kind of one of those things where once I realized that I didn't know anything, like once I realized like, oh, there are some fucking singers out there, you know.
Yeah.
I remember really trying to dig into New Edition's Boys to Men, the song Boys to Men by New Edition. And Ralph Trevzant, I think, sings lead on that, and he just goes off. He just fucking goes. And I remember trying to learn all of those runs, everything that he does, and being like, wow, I am light years away from this performance, from being where I want to be with this. And then it's one of those things where then you get to the point where you can perform that, but then you're like, wow, this moment in this Anita Baker song, or this moment in this Jeff Buckley song, or whatever, you find you really start going into singers and finding, like, I don't know, you sent me
I was gonna say, I sent you the Tori Kelly runs in
Tori Kelly.
hell yeah.
Jesus Christ.
What?
Crazy.
And
What is this song?
it just
Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Yeah.
But I did not even do them well. And that, James will kill me. My boyfriend was in the other room, and I sat there for an hour trying to learn those, and I still don't do it perfectly.
And then you do the thing where you're sitting eating, and you're like,
yeah,
trying, and it's just
we had just been talking about it, and I was like, I wonder if I can do it, and I kind of learned it, but like not really. And then you look at like someone like her, where you're like, that just flows out of her, like Jake Collier, like talking to her, like doing it once, and then she just like repeats it perfectly back at him. Is just like so crazy. But you kind of, I think it's really interesting to hear you say all this, because from where you're at, versus where I'm at, which like you kind of forget. I feel like I hit that like apex of like not knowing anything and the confidence, like after we put out our first EP, where like I wrote Real Horror Show and I was like, I'm the best songwriter alive. Like I was like, that is my magnum opus. I killed it. And don't get me wrong, I love that song. But like I still just like, now I realize that I actually don't know anything about songwriting, and I'm just like, throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And sometimes something I write is really not great. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, whatever. But like, the more I learn about it, the more, and getting into the habit of practicing it and consuming as much as I can and going, that's what I really like about that song, or like, I really like that guitar sound, or like whatever.
Well, that was the thing, is that I, when I think about it, I really practiced more than anything else. I practiced songwriting, and even when I say that, I don't mean like lyricism. I did practice that as well, but it was really about chord structure and rhythm and groove and timing and meter and feel and those kind of things that I was just. I was just like obsessed with looking at all the different ways to do that.
I feel like you can really hear that practice on Fully. I feel like there is like so much intricacy on that record. I mean, that's my favorite record of you guys, but so I'm talking because it's my favorite. But like, I feel like you can really hear the intricacy on that record, and it's so like weird, but not in a bad way, like in such a wonderful way. You know what I mean?
It is.
It's so kind of atypical that it like perks your ears up all the time, and I think that's really
But it also speaks to your guys' ability to have longevity in an industry where like after a lot of like bands or albums will peak out they'll hit their moment at the top of the world, and then they're there for 2-3 years. They might play a couple reunion shows like a decade later, but I don't know, that commitment to continuing to actually learn and improve,
The work
to
of it.
stay in practice,
Yeah.
is not an easy thing. Like, already I feel like people aren't ready to commit to the practice to get to stage 1, let alone to stage 2, 3, or 4.
Well, that is an amazing point. Sorry, I want to cut you off.
No. But just once you get to stage 4 or 5, or what could be considered by someone the peak, to still be committing to the practice to whatever that next peak is, or just maintaining.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Well, no. Yes. And the thing that you said too about, so many people aren't really committed to the work of stage 1. One of the things that I found really, really fascinating. So, I was talking about when we were out there promoting like crazy, right? In the beginning. And, everybody did that. Lots of bands did that. We weren't special in that. But one of the things that as we got, as we got more success, and I remember, I have this distinct memory of going to a skate park, going to a signing to give our demo to wait in line at the signing to really, because we didn't really have anything we wanted to get signed, but to pass a demo along to Sum 41, right? They were
Sick.
there doing a signing, right? And, we give off the demo and whatever, and we had this cool conversation, and then, you move on. Well, when you're on the receiving end of that, do you listen to the demo? I listened to those demos, right? And one of the things that was really fascinating was there were some great ones, and, we would Gym Class Heroes was one of those. I remember the Gym Class Heroes demo and whatever. You would get some good demos sometimes, but most of them were not. And most of them really belie the reality that it's way easier to get the thing into the hands of the person. Everybody has this image that like, that's the thing. It's getting that chance. I'm never going to get that chance. And everybody focuses on the chance. That is actually not the important part.
It's the
you
work.
can make that happen. That is not that hard.
Mm-hmm.
What you really can't, what's harder is then put yourself in the position of the person listening to it, right? Now they put that in their CD player, in the era, or, now they open the link or whatever, and they're listening to it. The first 20 seconds, you maybe get 30 seconds of their time.
Yep.
Really, like if that's certainly like, I'm a polite Midwest boy. I would listen to your whole song.
You're gonna listen to the whole
to the whole record, but that's not everybody. I
think that's
that
rare,
is
in
not
fact.
even close to everybody.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
when you're making a song and you're writing a song and you're thinking about, that first 30 seconds, that is fucking everything. That's the walk the line. If you had one chance, one thing to say, before you leave this earth, this is your moment, say it.
Yeah.
Well, that's that moment. And you're not going to get there by hustling. You're going to have to art it. You're going to have to make some, you're going to have to care about the craft and care about the art of making a song in order to have that be interesting. Because it's like, yeah, you can dumb luck into great songs. People do that all the time.
Totally.
But to predictably do that, you have to know how to do that.
Well, and I don't think you can dumb luck your way into songs, but you can't dumb luck your way into
A long
10-year career
Yeah.
or a sustainable financial career.
Exactly. That's exactly true. And I feel like that's one of the things that's really frustrating for me is a lot of times people will ask me about the financial advice about being in a band, and I'm like, and I start giving songwriting advice, and they're like, "Oh, no, I mean
That's not what I
like,
want. Yeah.
business stuff." And I'm like, "This is business stuff. This is the fucking thing. This is what you're selling. If you care, and the thing is that I don't care about money. I ended up making a lot because I don't care, because I'm so busy writing songs. But it's like, if you care about writing songs, that's the thing. That's the thing that everybody wants. That's the thing that everyone's paying for. That's the thing that they're designing AIs to try and do. That's what they want. People want songs, and they want songs that they relate to. And they're not going to, and they get songs that they relate to. You can contrive songs, you can contrive hits. You cannot contrive inspiration that comes from people who live and experience and channel that into their instrument, and, channel their pathos and their ability and their confidence and their, all of those things into the music part. That is the songwriting part. And that's the thing that I can't tell you how many times as the band was coming up and people kind of knew I was an okay writer, I would get called in a lot to write for other artists. And I didn't really do it. I kind of tried and dabbled, and I'm like, I don't enjoy this. But there was a thing, I don't know if it still happens in the industry that much anymore, because I am fucking out. I don't care anymore. but there was a thing where you would, where they would sign somebody. They'd sign, a really cute girl, right? And that was the extent of it. They didn't have anything else. There was no vision of music. There was no anything. There was no, she's really cute, she can sing, right? And then it's like songwriter, make up a thing. And it's like anybody can do that. Anybody can pay for that. What is more important, and I think and this is by the way, no commentary on the cute girl. I'm saying like
good for her.
If for her, if what she was doing, if she was encouraged early on, instead of just focusing on being, on singing well, for example, right? If somebody sat her down and was like, fucking right, that's the thing, right? Mm-hmm. That, there are, it's funny. I can think of some really, really knockout, gorgeous, marketable, and very talented singers, who aren't artists and are really just writers because they are so fucking good at that. That's you don't need to be on stage, you don't ever need to be out in front. So because it's like, that's so valuable. Not necessarily that there's, you can want it, you cannot want it, whatever, but it's so valuable to write songs and know how to do it that if you can really work at that, that's the thing. That's the whole, to me anyway.
This is so in line with, how Danny and I think about this as well, which is very lucky because we've fallen into working with and being around a lot of people who I think align with us on that, which I do actually think is sort of rare. Like it is. It's very rare. It's super rare. So it's like, it's really nice. I just had a really not funny, but very interesting conversation with my team today. And it's sort of it's starting to feel like we're all kind of on the same page and aligning with what we want, which is really nice because Dan and I care so much about writing songs, which is funny because that's not what I originally got into this for. It's not what I ever thought I wanted to do. I always thought that I wasn't a writer, but I had been surrounded by so many dear friends of mine who were just fantastic songwriters. And I was always like so enamored by that and just like, it's not for me, but you guys are amazing at it. I really wish I could do that. And then once I started doing it and drawing a lot of inspiration from those people and like whatever, that now it's like feels like a huge, when I'm not writing, it feels like I feel bad. Like I feel like I have like stuffed up feelings that I need to get out or whatever. And I don't necessarily use them to like process. Sometimes I do, but like, it just feels like something that I have to do. And like I said, that Dan and I care so much about that as the forefront of our project is the kind of writing and the kind of music that we make.
Well, and I was saying that I did it without meaning to, there's a certain facet of that where it's just fulfilling. It's just something you have to do. Yeah. And then, Pete, to your point that it's kind of also a muscle, it becomes a thing that you like have to be in, that you train it and you get better at it when you're in, I can lift a chord change now,
literally.
Whatever.
No,
I don't know. I don't know. I was thinking about who are the biggest artists on earth right now? It's still probably like Taylor Swift and Beyonce. They're fucking writers. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm.
Taylor Swift,
they're gorgeous, they're talented, they can sing, they can dance, they can do all these things, but they are fucking writers. And you would sing those songs if they weren't singing them.
Totally.
They would be, and those are, and that's the point, is that I feel, and that's not to say that you have to be a writer or whatever, but understand that if you're not, that's what the advantage is. That's what everybody is bringing.
Oh, absolutely.
And also, one of the things that was a really fascinating lesson to me was, like I said, going into these records, I was diving into records and like just devouring albums and devouring the credits, in them, and just finding out everyone that worked on records. That's how I got into Toto, because I'm like, God damn it, they're on everything.
That is I do that on Spotify. I always am like, who produced this? Who wrote this? Who are these people?
Exactly. And you find out commonalities and all these other things. But one of the things that's really interesting is that, like, I was looking at Michael Jackson, right? I was looking at Thriller. Thriller is a really amazing record because, you know, it's got Billie Jean, it's got Beat It, it's got, you know, there are these really big songs. Billie Jean and Beat It, Michael Jackson wrote, and I defy other people to write songs that popular and that engaging. Those are legendary songs. However, he didn't write Thriller. He didn't write Human Nature. He didn't write PYT. He didn't write... There's a lot of songs on that record that are very big, and he, for what it's worth, I don't know if this was him or if this was his team or this was Quincy Jones or whatever, but there was enough of a sense of we need the best thing to win. That it was also, you know, it's not all ego. It's not all, you know, my idea has to win. Sometimes it's about letting somebody else write the thing or letting somebody fill the space.
We had to learn that lesson this year for sure.
What's that?
I said we had to learn that lesson this year for sure.
It's a big lesson, and it was really hard for me to learn. It was very frustrating. So Foley, up through Foley. So I had my experience, you know, after Cork Tree, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna fucking learn my job. You know, really get good at this. Whatever.
Okay,
and
now I'm learning my job.
What's that?
I said, okay, now I'm learning my job.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so funny.
And I went in and I did Infinity, and I wrote the shit out of Infinity. I also, that year, I wrote I wrote like a Cobra Starship album, and I wrote a Gym Class Heroes record. Like I was like deep in, I was like, I'm
writing
working
land.
so I'm going to write everything.
Yeah.
And then I went into Foley, and I was like, at that point, I kind of had a feeling too. I was like, there's an arc to careers, there's an arc to the zeitgeist. So I'm like, I'm not really going to try and necessarily worry about hits. I want to just say something weird. I just want to like express myself.
Me
whatever.
every day.
And
I just want to say something weird.
yeah. But you know, I mean, I kind of had whatever. So I kind of followed that. But, you know, 10,000 foot view up to that point, I had the keys to the car, and every time I would write, you know, I would write an album and there would be a hit on it and everyone would be happy. Foley was not a hit, and everyone was not
crazy
happy.
To me.
And you know, label and everybody was like, I don't know about that, whatever. Then the band kind of goes on hiatus because that was an exhausting thing. And I went and did a solo record, which was even more of a disappointment for those people. You know, like it performed even worse. So when we came back from hiatus, I kind of had my keys taken away. It was kind of like, you know, I was still the songwriter and everything, but it was kind of like, you're gonna have a lot of help. You know, you're gonna have people watching you. You know, so you know, started working with Butch Walker, who is a much more hands-on producer than Neil. Butch would, on occasion, he would even replay something if he was like, no, you're doing this wrong, and he would just pick up a guitar and play it. He didn't do that a lot because Joe and I are like, fuck, come on, really?
Yeah.
But like, it was a lot of motivation because it was like you gotta, you know, you have to kind of like take the shape of the glass and learn that it's not about your ego. But one of the biggest ones to me, one of the biggest things to me was, it was a really, really big experience was. So I come from writing all of these songs by myself entirely. We were working on My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark. And
Good one.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I had a weird feeling about that song for a long time because that was my first time of this experience where I didn't write everything. All of that wasn't my idea. A lot of it was. A lot of it wasn't, and there were moments where those things had to combine, and I was very upset about it. It was very, you know, someone invaded my little man cave. It's not man cave, but this is like the closest to analog. Is like this is my space. This is my safe place where I make music and stuff, and that's what I'm doing. And all of a sudden, somebody's in there, you know, over my shoulder, like, no, we're gonna do this. And I remember specifically, it was the verse, and that was something Butch had written the melody to, right? Butch had suggested this melody, and that melody won out in the room. We had the band was there. We even brought in management to listen, and they're like, no, that melody's really strong. And I would try and outwrite it and all these other things. Like, that's what it should be. But the lyrics weren't right. So So it fell to me to combine. Now, obviously, Pete writes the lyrics, right? So then I had to take Pete's lyrics and combine them with Butch's melody, and I was fucking livid. I was like, any idiot can do this, whatever, right? and so, but I'm putting it together, and there are idiosyncrasies to the way that I do that made it its own thing. But then there was also this thing where I did the dun dun, dun, dun,
Yeah.
right. I put that in, right, and it's weird because I was so pissed about it for such a long time that I wouldn't admit it, but I'm like, yeah, that did kind of make that. Like, it was one of those things. Up to that point, nothing worked.
Yeah.
The song didn't really make sense, but it was only these two notes, and I felt like I didn't do anything. You know, I felt like a fraud, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm like, again, learning the suppressing your ego and just serving the project and being like, that I put something into it that did make, like, everybody was doing their best. Everybody was shooting their shot, you know, like, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was able to, like, play around with the, you know, my songs know what you did in the dark bit, whatever. That was a lyric that Pete had written like forever ago. And it just came to me, and I just sang it that way, and I'm like, oh, that was, you know, it's everything kind of,
Yeah.
now we're all firing on all cylinders and everything.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't sucked it up and just, you know, like I said, because it was one of those things. I'm like, I don't want to fucking I hate this.
Especially because it's like a safe
Pete,
space for you, you know?
What's that?
I said, especially because it's like a safe space for you. So to like let
Yes.
someone into that can be very vulnerable and kind of destabilizing.
Yeah, well, especially because I have a method of the way that I write with Pete, with his words, because his words, he doesn't send them in any song form. So there's a thing where I have to, like, I pick out like these phrases, and I try and find some sort of thread to them, and I kind of pull them together, and I kind of find the rhythm in there. Well, all of a sudden I have this rhythm and melody that's established, and I have to now retrofit. I have to find lyrics that work with that and also work thematically in the song. And it was a lot of work, and I was very pissed off doing it. And that was probably the angriest I ever was in a project, like working in the studio.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like yelling and screaming and stuff, but I was just
Yeah, but you were just quietly like,
I was just like so mad, you know.
Yeah.
But then I sat back when we were listening to it. I'm like, fuck.
I know. Yeah.
So were you able to take that and before it actually released, like sit with it and feel good about it, or was it after it went out and was successful that
it was before it was released? When I listened to the first mix of it, I was like, that's
a good song.
It wasn't even big. It was just that, like, I was like, because that's the thing. I have never once known when something was going to be big. I've never at any point ever gotten that right.
That's so
I've had songs where I've been like, that's the one they're going to remember me by, and it's never it's never the thing. But
do you have I don't mean to derail you, but is there like one specific song you think of when you think of that, like the song that you
were like, this one's the
this is the one?
There's a few of them. I mean, there was something really special to me about What a Time to Be Alive. I was like, that one's gonna be the big one off this record. That song I was just so compelled by, or whatever. I remember on Cork Tree, I remember Dance Dance was something magical to me. That was like a personal thing where that song happened, and I was like, that was another moment where I was kind of scared because it wasn't the assignment of the band. You know, I wasn't really supposed to be making that. It wasn't a pop punk song.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It just kind of was.
It's just
me
Dance Dance.
happening.
You know,
so that song I did, but I didn't think that was going to be a hit. I was just kind of like, that's a song. But then that song had gotten a big reaction internally. Sugar had a big reaction internally, which I didn't see coming either. I sort of did. I knew it was catchy, but I didn't know it was anything special.
Yeah.
But so we had those two songs, and then it was like, we need another song. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write the best song. I'm going to outright the shit out of those two songs. And I sat down and wrote, I remember it was everybody else went to the American Music Awards. We were invited to go there. And I was like, I'm staying home. I'm gonna write the song that's gonna put us back there or whatever.
I'm
and
writing
it's gonna take us there next year, you know. And I sat down and wrote 16 Candles, which is a popular song of ours, but it's not Dance Dance or Sugar.
It's kind of like the culty favorite, I feel like, off that record.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily like contrived or anything. It was just like I was like, I'm gonna put everything I have into this. And it was cool. It's a cool song. But even I look back and I'm like, I like that song. I don't love that. It doesn't move me in the same way as some of the other songs that. So it's weird because I get it wrong a lot. I always get it wrong.
That's so funny.
On Stardust. It was really funny. There's a song. What's it even called? Pete changes the names, and then I never know them.
How's it go?
Yeah.
Oh, you kind of cut out. I can't quite hear you. What song is that?
It's empty without you. I got all this now. I got to keep myself.
Oh yeah, I know. I actually don't know what it's called either. But I do know that song, obviously.
Effortless. We used to call it Effortless. I don't know what it's called. Anyway.
He changes the name. That's so funny.
We wrote that song, and that song made the record. The record wasn't going to be an album. We weren't even starting an album until I wrote that song. And everyone was like, that's it. That's the song. That's the single. That's the first single. That's the song. And we don't even play it. Like no one's ever mentioned that song to me.
That's so funny.
Since it came out. So, yeah. Anyway, I don't know.
I'm laughing listening to you talk about specifically about like letting your ego go and kind of like taking in more, because we always say that like me and Dan function very similarly to Patrick and Pete. And
it's weird. Actually, we talk about it.
It actually is weird because when I hear you talk about this,
vibe.
It's like talking to Danny about it. Like we say Patrick is Dan and I'm Pete, very much so, to the point where it's like that, like, I think that has been a lesson, and I've struggled with it too, but I'm so like I'm so 10 steps ahead of where I'm at in the room, which is something I'm actually working on, because I'm like I get so ahead of myself while we're working on something that I'm like, whatever, yeah, just let that person come in and let's see what they have to say, and blah, 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 blah. Where Dan is like very meticulous about the way that she writes everything. And it is very insular between the two of us. And same thing, like I will just send her like the ramblings of a lunatic, and she's always got a melody that fits with them or something or whatever. But that has been, and it's the two of us, like, and we feel that very strongly, where it's like, this is how we do our thing together. And we've had success with that in the past. And like, and changing that is scary, or like letting someone else. And I think finally now we've been lucky enough, like I said, to be able to collaborate with people that understand that, and that like, that we're not constantly in defense mode of like, don't fuck up this thing that we're doing. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so hard.
But you also have to find yourself, you also have to like train yourself not to be, because that's another aptitude that's like really hard. And then, the other side of it is, after experiencing that, after kind of submitting to outside ideas, then having the wherewithal to also put out an idea that is your idea.
Yes.
Being like, no, but also this one,
And also being able to kind of delineate what's an actual good outside idea and what's maybe a bad outside idea, Well,
it's really weird, because for a little while there, I was writing stuff that I thought other people in the band would like. I wasn't even, so I was writing everything, but I wasn't, but after the experience of Say Rock and Roll, I was kind of writing more for everybody else, I wasn't really writing for hits and stuff like that, but I was writing to please everybody else.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really ever letting myself be inspired or take whatever. And there's I think there's pluses and minuses to that. I think there are some, high points and low points of that. Stardust was in part, a lot of that was kind of letting myself kind of like also put me in there, also kind of put my own idea, and like, also having because it's like, it's again back to that curve. You can have all the ego and then like not enough ego, not enough like
Oh yes, yeah. You have to
capacity
have
say,
ego,
like, you know,
like a healthy ego. I think as an
Yeah.
artist, I think it's so important. But
and
It
so
also
it's like
makes
kind
sense
of
you'd have
working
to-
yourself up to be like, this is a good enough idea to show you guys, right? Like, I should, yeah.
I literally just this year have stopped. I'm not kidding. I would do this every time I would throw out an idea in the session. I would be like, this might be stupid, and then I would
Yeah,
say
I
my
know.
idea.
We all do that. That's
And
like the thing. It's
I'm
the
like
thing.
trying so hard, or I would say the idea and then I'd be like, or is that stupid? Just like cut it before anyone could tell me that it was stupid. I would just be like, I know it might be stupid. It might be stupid. This might be the dumbest thing I've ever said, but here's an idea. We're all learning.
Sorry, Pete, you were going to say something.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
No, just to the previous point of, it makes sense that you would have to rebuild that confidence a little bit to coming out of, you have the keys kind of taken from you.
That's a good
You
analogy.
give it over, you see the success that comes from that. And I can see where a lot of people could take that and retreat and say, okay, it is time to give over to this and not give myself permission to like take control in the way I want to or write out.
Well,
in the way I want to.
again, I go back to this, I'm not going to name an artist, but there are artists when you look at historically who established themselves, established their sound, wrote all their songs, had a couple really big hits and became a big act, and then stopped replicating that and started working with co-writers and never wrote their own songs again. That's not an uncommon story. And I kept going back to Thriller because of that, because I'm like, it's really fascinating that for whatever reason, I don't claim to have any insight into this, but when you look at the finished product, this is a record that has a lot of people really inspired working on it, and one of those people is the artist, but there's all these other people that are also doing it. You know, there are, you know, I think about Human Nature, the song Human Nature. That was a song that Steve Porcaro from Toto, when you hear his demo of it, he wrote that song. It is Michael Jackson covering, you know, Steve Porcaro's song. It's not whatever. But the fact that he was able to reach in and have the confidence of self to be like, okay, you know, I'm going to write every single part of this song, but I'm going to only write whatever this song needs, and that really doesn't need that much. You know, it's already kind of there.
Yeah.
That's another thing altogether. That's one of those things. Back to Taylor Swift, I don't know what her writing process is like. The thing that shocks me, that is just jaw-dropping, is the consistency of her work.
Yeah,
right? So,
it's crazy.
So from the time she's a kid and she's writing these songs, whatever, they're her. That's the thing that's interesting, is that like, you know that she's working with other writers, and that other writers are bringing songs to her, and other writers are bringing ideas to her, and other writers are suggesting things, and she statistically has to be going, yes, Jack Antonoff, that's a good idea, but they all sound like her. They all get her. So
like a
she
through
must
line.
be doing a lot too, but she could potentially be doing all of it for all we know. I really don't know.
Well, has
but
a
the
strong
point
sense
is,
of self through it, no matter what,
yeah.
clearly.
So, but the point is that she is able to have the sense of self to know when to insert and when not to.
Yeah.
And that's the like, what is she, a billionaire? I don't ever want to be a billionaire, but if I did, that would be the thing. Like, learn that. That's you know.
I think it's so interesting. I feel like our conversation has flowed in and out, but the theme I think that is sticking out to me is just like this idea of like continual practice and dedication to the actual work. And I love what you said about like anyone can dumb luck their way into chance. Like that is not the hard part. I have definitely felt that for myself, that like we got extraordinarily lucky in the way that we got connected to Pete and to you guys and all of his stuff, but like it wouldn't have happened had we not really like doubled down, because we didn't know anything about anything at that point. And we doubled down and we worked our asses off to try to meet the chance, like to meet the luck with preparation, you know.
Somebody said to me once, I can't remember who it was, but that like it's not that hard to get people's attention.
No.
It's really hard to keep people's
them.
attention.
Yep.
Right? Like
Absolutely.
Like once you have it, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
And that's the thing. You know, everybody gets the 15 minutes. Okay, now you have it. How do you extend that? That's that's really hard. And the way you do that is by there was this really I think I'm sure I've told you this anecdote a few times, Keith. Whatever, it's still just so big to me was Sia said, I was asking Sia about songwriting, about because she was writing all these songs for all these people, and I just couldn't put myself into a thing, and I was just too attached. I just couldn't do it. Right?
Yeah.
And I still don't, by the way. I don't really. I never got over this. But she explained how she did it, and it was illuminating. She's like, I walk in with nothing. I'm booked for 2 hours. I walk in, and I pick a topic, and I expound on every conceivable idea that I have on that topic, and I put everything I have into it. For that 2 hours, I'm going to write the absolute shit out of this topic, and I'm really going to put everything that I have. I'm going to care. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to live in it. I'm going to all of that. And then the second it's over, I leave, and I never think about the song again, right? And she's like, because that's the only way you do it. You do that a lot, and you write a lot of songs because you need to trust yourself and know that if you were able to write one good song, you know how to write a good song. You can do it again. So then it becomes a matter of a game of odds. So write a lot of songs, practice a lot of writing, and don't get too precious about them all.
Yeah.
They will happen. If you just keep writing and you care about it and you really like, she's like, I never go in and just like whatever and say fuck it and write bullshit.
Yeah.
I care about it, and I write music that I give a shit about, but I don't give a shit. I'm paraphrasing or whatever, putting words in her mouth. But this was the vibe I got, was like, I don't carry it with me, and I don't fret over it. Like, cause that's what you do when you really care about an idea, like, I don't know, I should change this. No, I should change this or whatever. Yeah. It's like, don't do that. Song's over. I'm done. I'm off. And she ended up writing, all these fucking hits.
Yeah. I think that's the best advice in general that I've gotten in the last couple of years. I think Spencer Smith said to me, just don't be precious. Like, just take it and leave it. And then Pete, I think, also very recently said the same a version of the same thing to us. And I love Pete always tries to give us analogies like for theater, because like he knows that's like what our background is. And it always cracks me up, because I'm like, no, I get what you're talking about. He's like, it's like an audition. You know how you walk in and then you do your thing and then you walk out. He's like, it's like songwriting's like that. Just think of it like that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that is actually
okay. So it's like Cats. I've seen other things. I've done things outside of theater. It's not just.
It cracks me up.
Okay,
like,
but you know what? But you know in Rent when.
Yeah, exactly. It cracks me up. He always does that, and I'm like, I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying. But I think that's really kind of the best advice you can, because like I think we're getting better at that too. Is just I like to, if I can't finish a song, or if I can't think of a hook, or if I can't get it to like be the thing, I just put my guitar down and walk away. I'm like, I have to have to move.
Because the thing is that it's not going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, it won't happen. And if it does, it will. That's the other thing, is that like, I know that sounds so redundant, but the thing is that like, you're not going to like, I have never, in all the times I've been doing, in all the years, the many years I've been doing this, I've been doing this for so long. But in all the time I've been doing this, I've never had the moment where you beat a thing to death and it does actually get great.
Right.
Where it's like, where it's like you have that one couplet that you can't quite, you're one syllable short, and you spend, months thinking of that one word. We've never gotten that word.
Not worth
I've never seen anyone get that word, by the way.
But that's a pretty freeing philosophy to take on, to know like, if it's going to get there, it's going to get there. And if it's not, it's not. Like,
well, and the thing too that took a lot of, back to the confidence thing, that was really interesting, is that in this weird way, it feels like a lack of confidence to say, I'm not going to get this, right? Mm-hmm. It's not. What I'm saying is, you have to have confidence in, I'm going to get something else,
Yep.
So for example, back to Light 'Em Up, right? My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark was a lyric that Pete had written, and I tried to write a song around, and I didn't get it, and I didn't understand it, and I couldn't figure out how to make that song. Years later, I'm working on this song, and I'm sitting there all pissed off and whatever, trying to make magic out of feeling really bitter that I'm not, that I don't get to do all of my, weird Patrick stuff or whatever. And that was there. That lyric was there, and it popped back in, and I was like, oh, this is the perfect lyric for this moment, and I had it. And so just because it wasn't the idea for the moment, and just because you know that it's a good idea, but you don't really have the context, doesn't mean that it's not ever going to work. That's another thing. I'm a comic book nerd, and one of the things that I find really fascinating about the comic book world is that those guys were working so fast, and they had so little time to, especially in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, they just had to turn something around. So they didn't waste anything. So if you had a superhero that you designed and they got scrapped or whatever, that superhero popped up in something else. That if you had a, whatever, if you had a superpower or something that didn't work or whatever, or somebody was like, we can't do that, you used it somewhere else. If you wrote pages of stuff, if you drew them, you would just redraw them with different masks on, because you're like, I'm not wasting this work. And so it's not about having no confidence in saying, this idea isn't valuable. It's this idea blunt force isn't going to make this inspired. So the burst of inspiration for this particular idea has happened, and it hasn't worked. I'm going to file this away, and there will probably be another burst of inspiration that
brings it
saves
back.
this or something. It might be years later. It might be.
I always think about that when we wrote "Are You Scared?" The song "Are You Scared of Me Yet?" That was a random verse lyric in a song that we've been beating to death for months, and we liked the lyrics. We knew we liked the lyrics, and we brought them to a session, and we were kind of like, yeah, these lyrics are cool, but it's just like not like something's just like not working.
I don't know. It might be the dumbest thing I ever said.
I don't know. It might be so stupid. I don't know. Kill me right now. I don't care. But whoever it was with, they were like, oh, like the title of the song is "Are You Scared of Me Yet?" Like that's what we can like. That's such a cool, like that phrase sticks out to us so much, and we were kind of like, okay, like the rest of it's cool, like the rest of it's better or whatever, But
that's the thing, is you don't know.
You don't know.
This is a thing, by the way, that I think another part of confidence and learning to write and all these things, and learning to, the business, when people talk about the business, is knowing that you don't know what about you is great. There is something that is great about you, and you almost certainly will not know, right?
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I had to figure out, it took me a long time to figure out that, like, me not being good at being like a rock star is kind of the thing. So I would try I would try and like be more like the guy on stage and stuff. And it was like, I don't know. I don't enjoy this. The audience doesn't seem to enjoy this. And then when I had to like talk on stage, and I'm like, oh, I have nothing to say. And me just saying that worked better than me being like, all right, Cleveland, let's do it. Like whatever. It just doesn't. So, but to that point of like, you have this song, you have this lyric, you have this melody in there, and you thought it was a verse, you thought the rest of the song was better, but you can't see you can't see what you are.
Yeah.
Right. And none of us can. So that's the thing. That's what a producer is supposed to do. It's like what your management's supposed to do. It's supposed to be all these people around you who have some distance from it,
Yeah. And I think we're really lucky like that. Like I said, I keep saying this, but it's true. Like I do think that we've fallen into this kind of group of people that seem to be very, very aligned with where we are at. And we kind of have been a little bit more specific and a little bit more picky about who we bring in for those things, because it just needs to be the right thing. And I think in this day and age, it's very difficult to break a band and to kind of like, and keep and talk about longevity, like just keep their interest going with a band. And so Dan and I have started to get, I think, like I said, very, very specific and very like making sure that everyone who comes in is on the same page and not wasting time with like people who we just kind of don't really get it, or like the vibe is wrong or whatever, but I feel really lucky to have people that I know will be like, that's good, or like, that's not it. And I trust that.
Yeah, well, and there's layers to it too. Or also understanding when somebody doesn't know what they're talking about. Where it's like, know what you need to do. I don't know why I always remember this. My grandfather was like a god to me, and anything he said, I was like, sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember this one time he said to me, he was like, "Your house, you should paint it yellow. It'll sell better if you paint it yellow." And I'm like, no, it won't. I didn't say this, but I was like this moment where I'm like, I actually don't think that's true based on the other houses in this neighborhood and whatever. And I don't know. I'm like, maybe you don't know everything, and kind of having that capacity to like let yourself also know when you do know.
I remember I asked Pete this a long time ago, like probably a year or two ago, where I was like, I'm starting to feel the stress of having a million opinions in my ear all the time about everything. And I was like, just straight up, I go, who do I listen to? Like, who do I trust? Like, I don't know who's, and Pete told me to keep a tally of who was right the most often. He was like, who's right usually?
It's
and
true.
I was like, okay,
it's
now
a big deal.
Now I know, because now there are like 2-3 people that I think are almost always correct in their suggestion. And then I'm like, okay, I'm listening to that. If there's a difference in opinion, I'm going that way.
Well, and then sometimes they're wrong. Maybe they're wrong, maybe they're right 75% of the time, 25% they're not.
Pretty good margin.
You can compare and contrast with those people. You surround yourself with people who have opinions that you respect because they have some sort of track record, and then whatever. It's one of those things. I think a thing that this is human wide, this isn't just industry wide, but it's something that's really important, is we have this appeal to authority fallacy, where we just assume that because somebody has a hit or they have money that they know what they're talking about, and so we just kind of defer to them. And sometimes they might be right 90% of the time. They might be right almost all the time, but they will be wrong too. Nobody knows everything.
Right.
And so it's really important to to suss it out and know when to do it.
I was obsessed with that response too, because I was like, he could have easily just been like, listen to me, I'm right usually. I kind of expected him to do that, and he was like, I don't know, keep a tally.
No, that's the thing that's funny about
great.
Yeah, Pete, I don't know where I'd be without Pete, because he was like that when we were young. He always had this like vision of like, he always knew, I don't know, he just had this thing. It was really strange. We would meet with somebody and I'd be like, that guy was great. And he's like, I don't know. And he would, and that was it. And he was always right, that there was, this very good sense of like not trusting weirdos.
He's been right about, I would say 90% of everything that we've done. And he's very good at like being like, he'll just be like, I don't know. And I'm like, well,
another thing to that point, actually, that made me think about this. That's a great segue. I know we're talking we probably need to wrap up.
No, you're all good.
But this is a great point though, is that Pete will do that and be like, I don't know. He's right a lot of the time. He's right a lot of the time.
Yeah.
He is wrong sometimes. One of the things that I think has been really beneficial to me is watching, you write a song and you think this song's great, or you think this part's great, or you think this idea is great, or whatever. And you put it out there and you play it for, so we have, 2 managers really, and we have, and then Pete is really my primary partner in writing initially, but Joe also has some really brilliant input or whatever. So, and Andy is kind of, he has input, but he also kind of like loves being the workman and figuring out a thing. So he doesn't ever push back usually.
I love it.
It's kind of frustrating. I'll be like, dude, what do you think? He's like, I can play it like this. I'm like, I know you. Yeah, but what do you think?
But what do you think about it? Yeah.
He wants to figure out everything, every kind of music, everything you throw at him. So he never really seems to stop and think about whether he enjoys it. He's like, I'm just going to master it. It's kind of his vibe.
Him.
So he's no help, right? But between 2 managers and then Pete and Joe, right? So I put an idea out there, and maybe between those 4 people, one of those guys says, I don't like it. Everybody else says they like it, but one guy doesn't like it, right? I'm not going to, make it bespoke for them, but I'm going to try and figure out what didn't fire, like what didn't work on, like if it's, because it clearly worked well enough for these guys, but there's something that didn't grab him. And there's always going to be this thing, regardless of taste, regardless of all these other things, when you've got people that you're surrounded with that you trust and and they know what they're doing and everything, real will recognize real, right? You will, if a song is good, everyone's going to know, you know. Undeniable can't be denied, right? So
we talk about this like often on a level of there's plenty of stuff that we might see on the internet that might not be to our taste or our perfect thing, but there's like, it's pretty rare at this point now where we see something we're like, oh, I don't understand why this is resonating.
Yeah.
That's a super big point, is that I feel like there's a thing where learning to separate your taste from the reality of like, I understand that people like this and why people like this, right?
Yes.
I am not a huge fan of a lot of barbecue sauces. I've had like one or two, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. But I'm generally not a barbecue sauce fan, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand A, that people like it, and B, why people like it, right? Like, it's not about your taste. You know, if I had a barbecue restaurant and I'm like, oh, no sauce, I don't like the sauce. It's not fuck you, man. Like, it's, like it, whatever,
oh, no sauce, not for me. Thank you.
Oh, it's just not my thing. I just don't really enjoy the sauce. It's just not. And then it's like, well, okay, it's going to be open for a long time. That's it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love it. We have been talking for so long. We should probably wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we could talk to you forever, but
I know,
appreciate
we really
you
could
gave
go
us
all
so
day.
much of your time. We don't want to.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No, this has been so awesome. I loved this conversation, and I think it's going to be really interesting for people to hear. Like, I think that our audience will be like very, very captivated by this conversation, which is really cool.
Yeah.
It's fun to talk about. I love talking about this stuff.
I appreciate you being willing to dig into all of it on a career level, on a process and craft level. Yeah. It's just, like I said, we've talked to a lot of people at different stages of the mountaintop, but we haven't really talked to people who've hit like the real mainstream peaks like that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
getting to
Well, like
hear
I
your
said,
perspective is so cool.
we haven't played the moon yet. So
Moon 2026.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's
Moon
coming.
FOB show.
It's the big year.
Wait, I have to tell you something. This just reminded me. This is completely unrelated, but I just moved, and I had all my boxes and whatever, and I had a box where I put the wine that you guys gave us on the last show where I kept it. We drank a bottle of it after the last.
Yeah.
Did I give it back? You gave it back to me. Yeah. But I have it in a box, and I wrapped it really specifically so it's labeled FOB wine on the box, and I forgot we had it, and I remembered I was like, we said that we were going to open it at a certain point, like I'm fairly certain it was when we play MSG was the
awesome.
the and we're playing it next year, which is insane. Wait, did you know
excellent.
that we're doing the Pierce the Veil tour?
Killer. That's
so
awesome.
We get to play MSG, and I can't remember if that was the thing that we said we were going to open it for, but I feel like it was. Daniel will remember, but I was like, that's so crazy because I expected to have this bottle of wine in my apartment for
that's what I'm saying.
15 years.
Sometimes if you're just doing it and you're just working, those achievements kind of happen without you really meaning to, without even thinking about it. It's really about, like focusing on the thing. Anyway, whatever.
It was just cool. I just remembered that I had it, and I was like, oh shit, we get to open that bottle of wine this year.
That's awesome.
That rocks.